Hey everyone, in this video I will show you how I removed this splash guard that I made probably 12 years ago. This old technology transducer, this speed wheel. I got a new GPS and all of this has to go. I'm going to have a bunch of holes, as you're going to see here in a minute, and the new transducer is just this tiny thing compared to all this. So in this video I'll show you how I filled all these holes, mounted the transducer. I decided to move the speedo pickup to the other side of the transom, and you'll get to see it all. So here we are 8 months later. It didn't take me 8 months to do this work. It took me this long to get the video together. But anyway, here's the speedo on the other side, and here's the big reveal. It came out amazing. The gel coat looks pretty darn good. I didn't match it perfectly, but I certainly matched it close enough for me. Anyway, it's perfectly smooth. It's really held up great. No cracks, no leaks. And I'll also show you in this video the work that I did up on the head unit there, up on the center console. I had to replace basically everything that was there, and it came out really nice. So stay tuned. This was a great project. I'm going to do is remove all the screws. I'm going to use an impact driver because that extra little shock seems to help get them out. Sometimes you can strip the screw. So you can see I cut this too short, or this became too short somehow, and I had to add a tube in there. It works fine, but if I just had straight tube, you know, there'd be one less thing to you know, one less problem. This I put on evidently with black 5200, so I'm going to have to get a scraper to scrape this off. And then I've got sealant and years of just different 5200. You can see I spray painted this black a little bit to make it look nicer. So I got a little bit of work to do, but what I'd really like is if, you know, I could mask this off, feather in the gel coat here, feather in the gel coat here. I'm just going to mask around this when I spray it, and you know, sand it out, polish it, and I think over time it'll look like none of this was ever here. The first thing I did was scrape off all the surface silicone with a wood chisel. Most of this is clear silicone, some was white. I'm amazed there wasn't water in this transom because I really didn't do a very good job sealing this up. This was a stainless steel screw that had broken off years ago. I actually remember doing it. I took a drill bit and just opened up the hole enough so I could grab it and twist it out. And then I took a larger drill bit and drilled out every hole until I was satisfied that it was large enough without any jagged edges where I could get plenty of 610 in there and ferret out, and it was, you know, not likely to leak. This is actually a painful process because you're just wrecking it. I mean, you're really digging it out. Here I decided to move the Speedo pickup to the other side, so this was just chiseling it out. I cut everything on the inside and then just yanked it out, and it came out pretty clean. This was all 5200. I was surprised how easy it came out. So because the hole's so big. Now here's the new one from Garmin. And wouldn't it be neat if it actually covered that giant friggin' hole, which it does. How cool is that? Now that I've got everything opened up, I haven't shot any air in it yet. I actually need to vacuum some of this out because I don't actually want to push dust into the boat, because some of these screws are pretty thick and I'll likely not get all the way back with sealant, so I don't want any dust pockets back in there. But what I'm going to do now is sand it. I'm going to use 120, 220, and then an older 120 that's kind of smoothed out. And I'm just going to do it by hand. I won't block sand it until I'm ready to gel coat it, but we're just going to sand it out. This really sanded out nice. This area that I'm sanding is forming a depression, and you'll see that later on when I fill it. I actually used gel coat to fill it. I could have used a fairing compound, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I was really kind of surprised at how easily all this sanded out. Now I was using some pretty aggressive paper, right? But it was pretty easy, and then I vacuumed out as much of the dust as I could, and then I shot it with some compressed air, just to really try to clean out those holes as best as I could. All right, next I'm going to take some acetone and I'm going to wipe down the whole area, but I'm also going to take a little paintbrush. I guess you could use a cotton swab or really anything, and I'm going to just swish the acetone around in each one of these holes, because I want it clean in there. I want to make sure that I pull out whatever dust is in there. I just want to give the sealant that I'm going to use. I'm going to use 610. I want to give it the best possible chance of grabbing as deep in there as I can get it. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to get all the way to the back of these holes, so there'll be an air pocket in there, but there's no wood in this transom. Transom's really dry. Even though there's no wood, you can get water in the foam, but if I had any water in this transom, it would have likely come out when I took all these holes out here, or screws. So I feel good that the transom's pretty darn dry. God knows there's enough opportunity for water to get in it. My paintbrush is starting to melt. Not really designed for acetone, I guess. So there's the, I'll just do that with all the holes, and then I'll find a rag around here somewhere and wipe down. Go find a rag. I'm going to use 610, this stuff, to fill all these holes. 610, it's a structural epoxy adhesive. It comes in this nice little thing here that will mix it for you. You can see it coming down the tube there, and shoot just a little bit down here on a paper bag. And I'm using this for two reasons. One, I can get it deeper than I probably could have any other way into these holes. And it's a great product. I mean, this stuff is so freaking strong. So I'm really trying to, you know, I know there's air back there, but I'm really trying to like press it in and just fill the hole. I'm giving it like 2 or 3 pumps. To try to put as much pressure on it as I can to fill the hole and get it down in there. These were previously done with Marine Techs, and it's nice to see that they've held up. There's no blistering around them. This is probably pointless, but I'm just going to put a little bit of 610 on the outside. It'll likely, most of it will get sanded off, but at least it'll fill maybe whatever pores or anything that I can't see around the seam there. And I got this spot here. All right, I am satisfied that I have an overkill here of product to you know, fare down with a little putty knife here in a second. But I definitely have enough product on here, that is for sure. All right, so next up is to kind of knock these down. I'm going to use just this mixing stick. It's a 3M mixing stick, but it has a nice little end on it. And I got a whole roll of paper towels, because I'll probably go through a few of them, but I'm just going to take and wipe it off. I don't want to wipe it too hard. Just wipe. And just a nice smooth, you know, I want the fill to be slightly proud of the surface, right? Because when I block sand it, it'll be all level then. Oops. So what I did was accidentally, now if I had a fatter thing, I might go get a fatter thing here just to do this part right here. In fact, I think I will. I'll be right back. Actually, I'll just do these up here real quick. When I went and got that putty knife, or, you know, mixing stick, I didn't realize that there were so many of these this close together. So all I'm going to do is just make a nice even wipe, and probably I should start up here. All right, that's it. That's all there is to it. I guess every one of these things are custom, but the old one mounted way out here, right? Because it is this thick. We already covered that. The new one, now that I've cut these cords off, I can get it all the way back to here, right up against where these wires came out. So I can get it all the way back to there, and it fits just fine, and I can still reach this little tab if I need to pop it off if I were to leave the boat overnight somewhere and I wanted to take the GPS off. So the good news is I saved this much of this mount, and I can reshape the new one to drop down right here, and then I don't need these stupid tabs. I can just kind of shape this right around here, make it, you know, just like a little bit of an S curve right here, and reproduce this exactly. I'm just going to use it as a template and then reform this. I've removed everything from the top here. I took the windshield off and scraped all the silicone off the top. It doesn't have to be pretty. I'm not really worried about the cosmetics because it's going to get covered by this piece of starboard. But this piece of starboard here, this little wedge, is what I made years ago to get it to be level. This was just kind of shoved in there, and there was just kind of a silicone and air gap here. I'd like to do something different this time, and I'm not really sure what I want to do. There's plenty of material here, so if I wanted to make a big mess, I could take a belt sander and sand the back of this off. Put like a level line back here, and then just take the material down to that line. Then I would have to put the starboard cap on it, and the cap would have to be, this line would have to be perfect, or you'd see it. The other option is to put another black wedge of starboard here, and then fill this with, epoxy so that it's level. And that'll grip a solid surface so that there's no air and water that gets under there. I think that's probably what contributed to it cracking. Anyway, that's where we're at. I decided to go ahead and just basically kind of pour a new level mount, I guess, here, a level surface. So really all I did was fill the holes with hot glue, and then mix up some 610, and then I made this board, which is the right thickness, and then masked out everything else. And once this cures, I should be able to snap that board off. And then I just used the putty knife from this Transom to, level it out. I did take some care to round off these corners. Let's see here and here, and it should be a flat surface that you'll never see. And I can put a little bead of black silicone around the front, and it should work really well. All right, now I'm happy with it. I positioned it so that the scratches will get cut out that are on the back side, and you just screw it down. And we're going to take a router and trace this with one of these ball bearing bits, like that. So we're going to use a straight bit. Gotta find one. All right, well, after a little bit of reshaping here to get that little mistake out, actually, I'm pretty much done, and it came out perfect. So now I'm going to round over the top. If you router stuff, you'll probably agree with me that I set this bit just a little bit too deep. It turned out fine. It just created a little extra work to clean up that edge. And here's what it looks like with all the tape and that board gone. And then here's what it looks like with the starboard on top. So overall, it came out great. I'm happy with it. My experience with this 610 is that it's actually harder than the gel coat around it. So I'm going to sand it before it's rock hard. It is very hard, but it hasn't cured overnight. It's cured for about 4 or 5 hours. So I'm going to give it a light sanding, and I'm going to use a block of wood that's been cut flat, just one slice, right? And this is 220, I think. Yeah, 220. And we'll just give it a light sanding. Sanding this before the 610 completely cured was a really good idea, because you'll see it took way more work than I thought it would. The block is keeping the sandpaper up off the gel coat for the most part, which is a good thing. And I'm going to paint gel coat all over this and then do this process again. I'm going to use gel coat as fairing because I don't have any fairing compound. But you'll see later the depressions that I made sanding it by hand here at the end, because I thought that I did enough with the block. But This process, or this step, was a really good idea. The timing was good, and you know, I don't do this for a living, so I really was kind of guessing my way through most of this. I've done it a couple times, but every time seems a little different. Anyway, way more work on this step than I thought it would be. I just let it sit like this overnight and let it completely cure, and then started back at it in the morning. All right, I'm going to just put a coat of gel coat on here. I'm going to brush it on. First, I'm going to clean it with acetone. Now, what I'd like to do is just do one spray coat. So this isn't perfectly smooth. So what I've done is I've mixed up 2 ounces of white gel coat, 12 drops per ounce of hardener, and about 10% acetone to thin it out so it flows a little better. And I'm just using a brush, and all I'm going to do, you can see how drippy it is. I'm just going to put a coat of gel coat on here and cover all the areas that there are holes. And I don't really need to go too far outside of that area, because really the only purpose of this is to give me a little bit more material to sand. And give me a little bit more coverage, because I just want to I really just want to spray once. And if I don't build the gel coat a little bit, I'll have to spray multiple times. I'd really rather not do that. There's a little dip right there. I mentioned that I thinned the gel coat with acetone, and in my experience, acetone does turn white gel coat a little bit of a yellowish color over time. I've had it also happen almost instantly. So if your final product needs to be white gel coat, then you probably should use styrene, because that is less likely to change the color of white gel coat anyway. The final product I'm going to tint, so I really didn't care, and most of this is going to get sanded off anyway. But here's what it looked like when I was finished. I really just concentrated on the areas that I sanded the most, because remember, what I need to do is create a flat surface across the entire transom, and I'm mostly just filling in areas that I over sanded. So this is after everything's been sanded. You can see that coat of gel coat that I put on after being sanded filled in all of this is completely smooth now. So this is where the 610 was, and this extra gel coat here filled all this area in. There's some holes here, hole there, a hole right there. This area up here was pretty good, but all of this blending will cause it to be perfectly flat when I spray it. So would a fairing compound do the same thing? Yes, but I didn't have any, and this works out just fine. So this is done and ready for paint. You can see it's just a rock solid chunk of 610. I block sanded it so that it has a slight bow in the middle. I took down the outside edges just a little bit, and the reason for that is the Starboard has a way of cupping over the ears, and I wanted it to be slightly higher in the middle. And you can see right here, that little gap right there, that will be screwed down. Little gap on this side too. And once the GPS is mounted and there's some weight here, it'll make it appear flat and keep it nice, you know, for a really long time. What I'm gonna do next is mask off all of this, and then just take a paintbrush and paint all of this black, matte black, same as the Starboard, so that when you look at it from the side, it'll just look like there's a, you know, Starboard wedge in there, probably. At least that's what I think it'll look like. I debated painting it white, but it's not part of the dash, and I'd rather it look like part of the starboard than part of the console, I think anyway. Here's what it looks like after I painted the edge. This is boot stripe paint. It's a little bit more glossier than I planned it to be, but it's fine. In fact, over the 8 months since I did this project, it has already faded pretty nicely. And then I also went back in with a razor blade and cut in that black paint a little bit tighter than what's showing here in the picture, so it looks a little bit more professional. I could have put more energy into sanding it out so it doesn't look like a strip of caulking, for instance, but I didn't, and like I said, over the time that it's been since I've done this, it looks great. It sits on there perfectly straight. There's almost zero clearance between the GPS and the windshield, which is great. Looks, custom. And then the angle on the screen matches the angle on the lip there of the windshield. So the whole thing turned out great. This was where the old wires went through, and I turned it into a USB port. I haven't actually used it, but it filled the hole, and it is actually functional. Everything is flat and sanded. You can't really see it, but everything is blended out to about here, and in here, and of course all around here. Wiped down with acetone, but it is completely smooth. There's no ridges or bumps. Everything's filled and extremely hard. There's no concern about any of these plugs falling out. There's plenty of material to hold the 610 in. And then of course, because I put a layer of gel coat on it to use as a fairing compound, you can see all the dips. And this looks like it's jagged, but it isn't. What it is the difference between the epoxy and the gel coat. It just perfectly filled in. This is a better example. It perfectly filled in where I swiped it with the putty knife. So even though this looks jagged, it's perfectly smooth. Anyway, I'm going to tape up everything, and then I'm going to shoot it with gel coat. Okay, everything's taped everywhere. I don't want to get spray anywhere. Anyway, I'll tape this a little bit more, but I'm really concentrating the spray right in here, and I'm just going to blend it out around the edges, so I won't get carried away here. Really just overspray is what I'm trying to avoid. All right, so what I did here was I mixed up my gel coat, and I didn't put any hardener in it, and I just keep adding dye. You can see that's the gel coat with nothing, and then here is darker, darker, darker until I'm right about here. I'm gonna go a little bit darker until I match the transom without being too dark, and then I'll wipe off this gel coat that doesn't have any hardener in it with acetone, and I'll be good to spray. This thing is called a Prevail sprayer. It's disposable. It's basically a little spray can attached to a bottle, and it pressurizes the bottle and acts as if you're spraying a can of paint. It doesn't spray very much at all. In fact, very, very little comes out, and the solution has to be extremely thin to come out of this little nozzle and actually work right. When these things fail, it's because it wasn't thin enough. That's generally the problem. It just wasn't thin enough. Anyway, you can see how many coats it took to get coverage as those fill holes or fill marks disappear. But it worked really well. I was able to just keep building gel coat in this area and then lightly feather it into the surrounding existing gel coat. You can see how badly orange peeled it is. That will sand out later. And the color is pretty good. Once I sanded this off, the color isn't as good as it could have been, but I'm happy with it, and it came out fine. And the next step here is to cover it with a mask to get it to cure. All right, I really hate this step, but it's pretty important. This is mold release, and it also acts as a barrier. And unfortunately, it has the potential to screw up your surface. All right, so I was able to get it to spray thin enough here. This stuff is water soluble and you can thin it with water. So basically what I did was put it in the Prevail sprayer and thinned it with water and got it to a point where it would spray through through this thing. And like I said before, in order to get this thing to work, it's got to be super thin. And if you stick it in straight, it just splatters and it just won't spray properly. And if you use a squirt bottle, like a plant mister, it'll glob and potentially wreck your surface. And ideally what you want is like a sheeting effect. So what that does is it helps knock down some of the orange peel behind it. It kind of acts like a mold a little bit, like a surface mold. And it won't, the finished gel coat or the gel coat that I used won't cure without having this stuff all over it. You've got to block the air from getting to the gel coat. So anyway, as you can see, I just kept spraying until it started sheeting down. And once I got a pretty good layer of it and as uniform as I could, then I just walked away and let it dry overnight. All right, so I've waited overnight and I'm just gonna spray this down. This stuff comes off kind of easy. You see it starts to foam up, but you do need to scrub it a little bit. And all it is just a plastic, like a plastic rubbery coating. Okay, so give you a little bit of a close-up here. This area here is just some overspray, and this is an area that I screwed up. But I couldn't be happier with the color. Now it's all orange peeled. Let me blow it off. So there is quite a bit of orange peel, and I'm going to have to wet sand that out. I expected to do that. It is way more orange peel than I thought, but it'll be fine. The coverage is good. It's plenty thick enough, so I'm pretty pleased. As far as the color goes, this is a little bit misleading right now because it's feathered in with the spray effect. And when I start to sand this down, I'm going to eliminate that down to a harder line, and that's just going to cause the variation to be more obvious, but it is what it is. So I'm starting with some 600. I'm going to start dry, and then I will switch to wet. And I'm just going to go really lightly, so I'm not going to actually use a block yet. What I'm really doing is just knocking down this this blend mark. And then unfortunately I ran my fingernail through it right here to see how done it was, how cured it was. That was stupid. I wet sanded this for a long time. It really did. It was way more work than I thought it would be. I had to walk away from it a couple times because my fingers hurt. But the result was just so great that it really just kind of keeps you going. I kept busting my knuckles into the, you know, the hook on the back of the boat there, and you know, it was really hard. I don't want to mislead you. This was a lot of work, but you just keep going until you get the finish you want, and you've just got to be careful not to go too far, right? Because if I went through the top layer, it would you'd start to be able to see the fill marks. But anyway, that's all the paper I went through, and I'm really happy with the result. It came out really good. The variation in color almost just kind of looks like shadows for the most part. Okay, we're about a week later. Still, I mean, it's perfectly smooth. The only annoying thing is the color isn't exactly perfect, but there is no transition at all. It's perfectly feathered in, perfectly smooth. So I'm thinking over the next couple months it'll probably blend even better. Next, I'm going to polish it. All you need is polishing kit. I got this because obviously it's pretty tight in there, and I'll be able to use these foam pads to get in that area. I'm going to tape everything up with blue tape so I don't sling product everywhere, but these are the products I'm using. It's a 3-step process. I probably don't need step 1. So this is the, let's see, that's number 3, ultrafine rubbing compound. There we go. So first up, the rubbing compound, it'll take out any swirls. This is really rated for after you've sanded with 1600. I've sanded all the way down to 2500, so I'm going to use this anyway, but it's probably not necessary. I found these little 8-ounce bottles on Amazon. Because of the size of the job, I'm never going to even use this much. And here is step 2, finesse it, machine polish, and then this is the ultrafine step 3, which just produces pretty much a mirror finish. So I'll do all 3 steps. I'll probably just time lapse it, and then it will be ready to install the new transducer.
This part was really easy and actually really rewarding because the shine just keeps coming. I taped everything up because I didn't want to sling product around, but mostly because I didn't want to hit the metal with the polish and have it become shiny in those areas. Anyway, I used all 3 steps and it came out great.
All right, it's ridiculously shiny, super smooth. Polishing it also kind of helps to blend it, especially in this area. This area is hardly noticeable, but it definitely blends better. I did not reveal any dent. Sometimes when you polish it, you see all the imperfections underneath the gel coat. That didn't really happen, which is good. So this is pretty much done. I'm not going to wax it yet because I want to install the new transducer and drill these holes and seal them up and allow that sealant to cure before I put wax on it. I don't want to, you know, it probably doesn't matter, but I'd rather there not be a layer of wax in between the sealant and the, you know, screw things that I put in here. So anyway, pretty much ready to install the transducer. I'm probably going to have to do this to the other side now because this side will stay much cleaner. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. So here's how I'm going to make sure that this thing is installed straight and at the right height. I'm going to go with the assumption that the trim tab is straight enough, tape off from there, and then work my way down to get a straight line for the mount. I took a level and wedged it up against the bottom of the boat to represent a clear plane of water. And then I taped the transducer to the level and leveled it. And now I have it exactly in line with the plane of water coming out from the boat, which is what Garmin recommends. Previous transducers that I've installed always recommend about 1/8 of an inch drop, and for some reason Garmin doesn't. So they want it perfectly in line, and because the boat has this step here, there'll be plenty of water coming up to, you know, I guess submerge the transducer up on plane. So I'm not really worried about that because it really actually is slightly below, but because of the way the boat is built, it's in line with the plane of water that'll be coming out for the most part. And I'll also drill the holes directly in the middle, so I'll have some wiggle room if for some reason it's not reading up on plane. But that is my plan before I start drilling holes.
When you mount anything in gel coat, you should always drill the pilot holes and then come back and drill much larger holes to clear that gel coat. What that'll do is prevent spider cracks from coming out, and gives also a little bit more area for sealant to hold in. Makes it a little more waterproof.
I switched over to the Speedo pickup side. right here. And I do this because I like to use black 5200 for two reasons. One, it's going to fill in all these holes and look better. And two, I think it provides a better seal. It doesn't get ugly like the white 5200. It just stays black forever. In fact, right up there, that's black 5200, and it's been on there for years. So it's just like a more finished look, I think. Anyway, in order to not get it everywhere, if you mask out the shape of what you're adhering, all the stuff that oozes out, you can just peel off. Pretty easy. I'll set up a tripod and show you what I mean. What I've done here is masked off where I want the cables to come down and where I want the little tabs that hold the cables and the hose to be. So I want it to be exactly the same on both sides because, you know, that's my program. And so those two horizontal tape lines will be where these clips go, and then the vertical tape line will be where the hose on the left and the cable on the right, transducer cable, runs. And these will sit right here like this, one there and one there, and then this line will kind of loop over and end up right here. And it'll do exactly the same thing on this side, except these will go like this. So the screws are going to go towards the inside because, actually, maybe I'll put them on the outside. Yeah, I'll put them on the inside. So anyway, that's how I'm going to make sure that it's even. Let's get to it. This is the splash plate or spray guard, I guess, for the transducer. How tiny compared to that giant thing that I built. And here's how it turned out. I've got the bottom clip in. I still have to put the top clip in, but came out really nice. And it's a little misleading here. They look like they slant in, but they are actually straight. This is done with the exception of one more clip. So I'll show you how I drill the holes for the clips. Really basic. And if you've been watching this long, then you know that we are now 8 months later after this job has been completed, and it is holding up perfectly. Nothing leaks. Everything works. The color, you know, as I showed you in the beginning of the video, is not perfect, but certainly good enough. That transducer, I ended up having to lower it a little bit, and because of the way I lowered it, I ended up just masking it off and covering the whole thing with black 5200. You know, I would have liked to not have done that, but I did it because I didn't want to move the holes, I didn't want to reseal it, and that just was what I ended up doing. As far as the console up here, the head unit, it really came out nice. So I reused my old bracket from the old Garmin, and that black, whatever, you know, wedge, that black 610 wedge is really not even noticeable. It sits perfectly level. And let's see, it mounts with these screws. They're out a little bit further than the old mount. And it's got the screws here. And I also drilled all the way through this time, so that if any water did leak down into where the screws are, it wouldn't build up in there with heat, because what ended up happening was it started to crack here. So this way any water that gets in there will drain, because you can see right there and right there, the holes go all the way through. And then there's a close-up of what that wedge looks like. And here's what it looks like from the back side. I was out on the boat, so this is all needs to be cleaned. But anyway, I just used black 5200 and sealed in. Well, that's terrible. I should clean that before I make my videos. Anyway, actually, I am going to clean that. Hold on a minute. There we go. That's a little bit better. And now at least you can see. Close this, get rid of some glare. Those spots are on the inside. But anyway, you can see how I mounted it back there. I mean, put the wires through back there. And then I showed you in a picture before the thing that was here is now a USB charger thing that I've never used. But anyway, there you go. That is the finished product. Very happy. Thanks so much for watching. I know this is a super long video, but it's really, really involved. And every time I started deleting stuff, I figured, you would miss out. So I just left most of it in. So thanks so much, as always, for watching. Please subscribe. I post new videos all the time, and I really appreciate your views and comments. See ya.